All right, everybody, welcome to the Hiking My Feelings Virtual Campfire. My name is Sydney Williams, and I am your host. And this is the first virtual campfire of November. So this is National Diabetes Awareness Month. We are running our Take a Hike Diabetes program this month and throughout, the rest of time, really. But we kicked off on Sunday this week. And so we've had some great gatherings already this week. We had a workshop with Doc Peace, who we interviewed last week for the virtual campfire. We had a workshop about making personal affirmations on Monday. Last night, we gathered with Kenya Jackson Salters from the Outdoor Journal Tour to do a little meditation and stay grounded in these wild and crazy times. But now we're here. So tonight I have Julianne Mahoney and Mila Clarke Buckley. And before we get into that, a couple different housekeeping type items. I want to show you guys some of the stuff we got going on here. See if I can do this without strangling myself. So we've got all kinds of cool goodies. So the Take a Hike Diabetes hat is officially here. It has our logo on the front. It glows in the dark. I'll prove it to you later that it glows, but it's too late right now. But so Take a Hike Diabetes hat, looking sassy. Olive on the front, khaki mesh on the back, glow in the dark logo. For those night hikes, life is good. We also released let's see if I can there we go. We released our trail journal yesterday. So this is the Hiking My Feelings trail journal. This is inspired by a notebook that I created for my backpacking trip across Catalina Island and then again through the Grand Canyon of the Tuolumne this summer in Yosemite. So it's 32 blank pages. We use dot grid paper, so you can get creative and doodle if you want. And then on the inside cover, there's the questions that I ask myself after every hike. Back cover, a little love note for me in case you start feeling some feelings while you're doing this. And yeah, so these are available on the website. They're also part of the Take a Hike Diabetes Care Package. We also have right now I'm going through all the things that are in the care package. So hat, trail journal, candle. This is our collaboration with Just Sway. If you're listening to the podcast and you can't see it and you don't have smell-o-vision, it smells like heaven. It's basically the most grounding candle I've ever had in my life. And also our fun unicorn stickers. Yay. Ooh, holograms. Totally nuts. So those are all things that you can get either in the store or by donating different amounts of money to the Take a Hike Diabetes fundraiser. So for anybody that's new and not aware, our Take a Hike Diabetes campaign is actually our big initiative for 2021, but we didn't want to miss the boat with National Diabetes Awareness Month. So we're kicking it off in November. You're welcome. So we have a 30-day program that we host on our online education platform that you can come join whenever you want. And we are narrowing things down we offer solutions for 3 different areas that impact blood sugar levels in the body. So I attribute a lot of my success in managing this disease to my doctor making it really easy to understand. And when I was diagnosed, there's lots of different factors that affect your blood sugar, but my doctors narrowed it down into 4 categories. So food, medicine, exercise, and stress. I'm not a doctor, so we're not going to talk about medicine or insulin or anything like that, but we have got some really great experts that are helping us with the other 3 areas. So we're introducing mindfulness practices for stress reduction and to help your mental health. We are also doing some really cool stuff with a bunch of different registered dietitians, one of which is here today with us. And also on the hiking, walking side of things, that's what we're doing for movement. And we're on a mission to hike 1 million miles for diabetes awareness. And the way that we're tracking that is with an app called Kilter. So if you haven't already, go to hikingmyfeelings.org/diabetes. There you can request to join the program so you can learn all these cool tips and tricks from all of our awesome experts. You can sign up with Kilter for the tracking your miles fundraising side of things. And then you can get yourself some of these sweet treats, like a little trail journal or a hat or something. So we are over $1,000 raised. Our goal for the month is $10,000. So if you haven't already and you want to donate, you can go to hikingmyfeelings.org and there's a big donate button right in front of your face on every page of our website. You can click there to donate, or you can donate through the Kilter app if you're tracking miles and raising money that way. So however you're doing it, we appreciate your support. And it's been really fun to see a bunch of new faces in our programs this week. And in our platform, we have folks sharing pictures from their hikes that they've been doing as part of the program. And it's just been really cool to see all the different places around the country where folks are hiking, and actually around the world, because we do have a participant who's joining us from Mexico. So this is an international affair. I'm very excited about it. And to kick things off on the nutrition side of things tonight, I'm going to be sharing some screen time with Mila Clarke Buckley and Julianne Mahoney. So Julianne Mahoney, aka the Outdoor RD, is a registered dietitian focused on bringing intuitive eating to the outdoors and helping women heal their relationships with food, their bodies, and exercise. She brings her expertise in 3 domains: love your wild, sharing tips and tricks for self-love; fuel your wild, teaching clients how to reestablish themselves as the expert in their body's wants and needs versus listening to diet culture myths, which we're going to be talking about tonight too; and find your wild, working together with clients to find movement that makes their body and soul truly happy. So Julianne's going to be joining us. We also have Mila. Mila Clarke Buckley is a diabetes patient advocate with type 1.5 diabetes, LADA. And she's the founder of the Hangry Woman blog, which shares approachable food and lifestyle tips to help others living with all types of diabetes. Hangrywoman.com covers topics like diabetes management, shame and stigma, cooking, and self-care from the perspective of someone living with the chronic condition. Mila's work has been featured by the New York Times, Healthline, WebMD, GE, Health, and Diabetic Living Magazine. So now this is the Price is Right part. Come on down, ladies. Cameras on, unmute yourselves. Let's talk about diet myths. Let's talk about nutrition for diabetes. We're going to crush it today. I'm so excited. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Yeah. Sweet. So let's start with Julianne. If you want to, actually, well, this is my show. I tell you what to do. Simon Says, introduce yourself. I gave like a little tidbit about who you are and why you're here, but let's talk about like, who are you? How did you get into working in this like nutrition space with outdoor folks? And what are you most excited to share with us today?
Yeah, so I'm Julianne Mahoney, obviously. We talked about that. I'm a non-diet dietitian. So I work specifically in intuitive eating and sports nutrition. So like sports nutrition, intuitive eating is just a mouthful. But I got into that space through my eating disorder, actually. So I've recovered from orthorexia and binge eating. And I knew I always wanted to work with athletes, but I wanted to come at it from a more gentle perspective that wasn't what I grew up with, where I was like on carb restricted diets and like always trying to lose weight for my sports. So I decided as I grew up and I kind of moved away from team sports and got into the outdoors that I found this like population of athletes that were amazing, like hikers of all different, distances and sizes, and people that rock climbed and snowboarded and mountain biked, and I just fell in love and I was like, okay, this is it. And yeah, I've basically worked for the past couple of years to get to the point, and now I run my own private practice working specifically with women recovering from disordered eating or eating disorders, who are just as passionate about being outside as I am.
Yeah, I dig it. We have so much to chat about. I'm so excited. Mila, let's talk a little bit about what brings you here. So you are in Texas, right? Like I nailed it.
Yes, deep in the heart of Texas.
Yes. And so how did you get to where you're at? And what are you most excited about in the diabetes space for Diabetes Awareness Month?
So for me, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 2016, and I felt like so confused, so pressured to give up all foods that I love. Like it felt like this whole world shift, and I didn't know how to handle it. And I also felt like I was being told to do things that like I would just never be able to stick with and that I would never be able to cope with. And so from that perspective, like I always felt like, well, I'm always going to fail because I'm never going to do like what my dietitian tells me. Like I'm not going to give up foods that are like culturally relevant to my Jamaican heritage in favor of like a kale salad. And now I love kale salads. Like they're definitely a part of my diet, but I eat them because I want to, like it's not like I'm forced to only eat things that are going to be good for my blood sugar. I've learned and adapted to be able to eat things that I love that also still help me control blood sugar, but also at the same time, I can enjoy them and I can feel like there's like some kind of place for me in being able to do that. And so I originally started my blog because of kind of that defiance. Like I had like a huge disagreement with my dietitian where she said, "What do you like to eat?" And I told her and she was like, "You can't eat any of that because you have diabetes. So here's the list of foods I'm going to give you." And I just thought to myself, like, that can't be like the only way. There has to be a way to be able to eat foods that I love, manage blood sugar, and still like meet the goals that my doctors want me to meet, and also still have like that joy around food. So I started sharing what I was cooking. And then as people asked for more recipes, I was like, here they are. And someone said, you should start a blog because I ask you for recipes all the time. And I was like, okay, I guess I will. And then here I am with the Hangry Woman blog. And so it's just foods that I really like to eat that are super accessible and like grab and go. It's things that anyone can make. They're not super difficult and it makes cooking fun, but it also brings people foods that they really like to eat and in a way that is like super approachable to them.
That was one of my favorite things about checking out your website was like there's this Q&A at the bottom. It's like, why do you have recipe? And I'm totally just like I'm gonna butcher it, but it was like the question was basically like, why are you sharing recipes for delicious food when you have diabetes? Because basically you're not allowed to eat that. And you're like, P.S. That's not true. Which
Yeah.
leads us into like everything we're gonna be talking about today. One of the reasons why I wanted to have you both on is because of this approach to food where it's like yeah, you can eat the things you like. Like, you don't have to eat like a rabbit for the rest of your life just because you have diabetes or any other kind of condition. Um, and so I love the idea of introducing people to intuitive eating as a way to manage type 2 diabetes. So, Julianne, like, I know that there's research that shows that this is a good approach for folks with diabetes, but what's like give us like a quick rundown of what intuitive eating is and then why that is the case that it's good for folks that are working to manage or live with diabetes.
Yeah, I like to give the short and sweet of intuitive eating is eating what you want when you want it with attunement to your body. And that's like the key part is really tuning in to what makes your body feel good, body, mind, and soul, because there are definitely foods that like feed my soul a little bit more than they probably nourish my body. And that's okay. They're equally important. Health is more than just one denomination. So intuitive eating is this non-diet approach to health. So it really focuses on removing negative obstacles, such as like food rules, negative self-talk, the food police. And then it really works on cultivating body attunement. So really tuning into how foods are affecting your body, affecting your mind, and learning to listen to your body and what it's telling you so that you can treat it with the kindness and respect that it deserves. And often, at least in my work with people that have type 2 diabetes, they're told that they have to completely ignore what their body is asking for, like didn't ignore all cravings and just eat like you said, kale salad for the rest of your life. And it's just not realistic. When we're in that restrictive mindset, we tend to hyperfixate on food and we tend to overeat to a point of discomfort. So we're not feeling good physically, we're not feeling good mentally, we're not nourishing our body fully, because I like to say our brains are kind of like toddlers. Like if you tell a 2-year-old not to put that Lego in his mouth, he's going to put the Lego in his mouth. It's going to happen. So if we're telling ourselves that we can't eat these foods that we love, all we're going to want is to eat those foods. And then we tend to have out of control blood sugar. We're not going to feel very good generally because we need a whole balanced diet. So taking an intuitive approach, you can have those foods. All foods are accessible. You have unconditional permission to eat, and you learn how to eat those foods in a way that still make your body feel good so that you can feel good mentally, you can feel good physically, and you don't, like you said, have to eat like a rabbit for the rest of your life.
It's one of the reasons that I'm excited to chat with you about this is because I didn't realize that that was what I started doing as a result of being diagnosed with diabetes. Because like my first attempt to like manage this disease was just like, I'm not gonna listen to anybody. Like I'm gonna take into consideration the like how to build a plate class that we did with the diabetes education team at the hospital. in which I was a patient when I was first diagnosed. But after that, I was like, I'm not going to listen to anybody anymore because everybody has an opinion. There's 9 bajillion books about what people with diabetes should be eating or shouldn't be eating. And I had known that, like, leading up until that point, everything that I had tried hadn't been working. So I was like, maybe I'll just start listening to my body. But, like, how do you get somebody to start eating intuitively? And what's your response for when people say, you can't tell me I can eat anything, because if you tell me I can eat anything, I will eat everything. So, like, what are some of the myths around intuitive eating that we can just like knock down right now and just get them out of the way?
I would say the number one that I hear is, if I do that, I'll never stop. Like, I will only eat ice cream and that's it. I'll never eat anything else. Like, why would I touch a vegetable if all foods are available to me? And I don't know if you've ever done that. Like, I personally, I mean, I've healed from binge eating. So I have ate cookie dough for like 3 days straight. It doesn't make you feel very good. I didn't eat a donut for 6 years once because I had a binge on them and I just couldn't touch them. If you overconsume foods, you're not going to feel very good. Like, we enjoy different varieties of food for a reason. They nourish us in different ways. So if all we're doing is binging on ice cream and just eating ice cream and cookie dough for all of our meals, we're not going to feel great. And we'll probably start craving like salads and roasted vegetables and other foods. So no, you won't keep on going. Sometimes it does happen. I will say that while people are going on an YouTube, it's a journey. It really is. It's not like, check, you're done. But while people are going through the process of learning to eat intuitively, sometimes you do overeat and you learn from it. I like to say every eating experience is a learning experience. You're just gathering more information about your body, and you're not gonna eat only ice cream for the rest of your life, because after a while you're probably going to be pretty sick of it. So that's my number one myth. I've also heard from a lot of people that you just can't eat that way. Like, no one should be allowed to eat sugar. Someone told me the other day that it was white death. That, like, you can't tell people to eat gluten or sugar, all of these things. Like, we have to restrict our foods because the government's poisoning us and all of this ridiculous stuff that people feel the need to tell me on the internet every day. But it's not true. All of our food is regulated by the USDA, the FDA. Like, there's a ton of research that goes behind every single product that is on the shelves in our supermarkets. There are no good or bad foods. Everything is dose dependent. So if you have too much celery or too much water, that is bad for your body. It's not, a cookie that is going to ruin your health. I would say the most dangerous thing is stress and your mindset around food. Like, having a negative relationship around food is way more dangerous for your mental health and your physical health than eating foods that you enjoy on a regular basis. So those are like my 2 biggest myths that I fight with people on all of the time.
And so, Mila, as somebody who's sharing recipes, like, what kind of myths did you have any that you had to overcome as a person living with diabetes? Like, were there things that you would just internalize as like a truth about what life is like with diabetes? And if so, like, what did you do to overcome that and then just like go about yourself? Because, like, you're enjoying the food that you like, I love that you mentioned like cultural relevance too, because that's a huge part of cuisine that like we don't always talk about. Like, we talk about like eat this, not that, but we don't ever really get into like the why of why we eat certain things, and like cultural relevance is a huge part of that. So talk to me a little bit about your mindset around all of that when you were diagnosed and where you're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. So after being diagnosed, I think like the one huge myth that we're always told as people with diabetes is that all carbs are bad. And so that is like the mindset that I had. Like, that was one of the first things that I heard from my care team was eliminate carbs, reduce carbs, keep exercising, and then, come back and see me in 3 months. And so I was like, well, if I can't have carbs, like, I mean, there are carbs in everything, but I guess I have to like get rid of all the carbs and compensate with other macros. to kind of like fill that void. And that was just so exhausting because it was like a friend would offer me like a taco, and I love tacos. And then I'd be like, well, I can eat the filling, but I can't have the tortilla. And they were like, what? Why? Like, why are you like skipping out on the goodness of a taco, which like is the tortilla? And then not knowing in my mind that like, okay, it's okay to have that taco, but maybe not like 3 or 4 or 5 tacos. Like it's okay to have the one and kind of see where your blood sugar is at, and then measure and understand from there what to do. So I think that was one of the big ones that it took me a while to like let go of. And also like the interesting difference to being treated with type 2 versus having type 1.5, having LADA now, which if you're not aware, LADA is basically like the in-between of type 1 and type 2, where your body still produces insulin, but you have the autoantibodies that are attacking your pancreas that are dwindling your insulin production down the line. So you have like the autoimmune response, and you're still producing insulin, which is an advantage because it lets you get away with a lot of stuff that you couldn't necessarily get away with. And so for me, like in that kind of like type 2 space, I was always told like restrict, restrict, restrict. Like you can't have this, you can't have that, you can't do this, instead of being given like just an opening to say like you can, however, this is how you can handle it if you decide that you want to have 70 grams of carbs at one meal. Like this is how you compensate. With type 1 and like kind of like going to a new endocrinologist and talking to new doctors, the conversation is completely different. And it's never a you can't kind of conversation. It's always a you can, but with insulin. And so that was always really interesting to me, that like the paths were so different that like 4 years ago, I was told like never eat bread, you can't have it in your diet, to now where it's like, well, you can just bolus for it and change like the way that you're eating around it. And so luckily for me, I actually figured that out like way before having a new diagnosis. And I just realized that like it's all about the testing and tinkering, and we're all so different that different things affect us in different ways. So my mom and I are kind of like a great example of a pair together. Like my mom also has diabetes, and she can never eat bacon, which I find really fascinating. Well, I say can never, she can have bacon, but it spikes her blood sugar. So she chooses to avoid it. But for me, it does nothing, and it's just bacon. And I'm like, cool, I'm going to eat it. It's fine. Here it is. And so like learning that, and learning kind of the fact that like, there's not a one size fits all approach. And I love that so much, Julianne, like that you work with patients on intuitive eating, because it's going to be different for everyone. And there's no like standard that says like every single person who looks like this or has this chronic illness has to eat like this. It's really what works best with your body and what makes you feel best. And then build on that and figure out what works and keep building on the things that work, instead of looking at what you have to take out or throw away.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. And I think it's interesting, like, so when I was first diagnosed, like I didn't join any support groups. I got one book, and it was like year 1 with diabetes, like what to expect from like a just lifestyle change perspective. Like now you have to care about a lot of things that you weren't normally thinking about prior to the diagnosis. Um, and so the T2D Healthline app, which is where I met Mila, like that was the first like community something that I've been a part of, where it's like a bunch of folks living with diabetes, and there's like message boards, and you can like ask questions and share resources, and it's brilliant. And I joined like some Facebook groups about like managing diabetes, reversing type 2. And I made the mistake of saying, somebody had asked a question about like how, like what they can eat. And I had said something like, I don't know what you can eat, but I can tell you, like, just in this group alone, there's like 30,000 people in this Facebook group. I was like, just in this group alone, there's like 9 million different meal plans people are on, or nutritional plans. And I was like, for me, for example, like I can eat a banana, doesn't do anything to my blood sugar. And apparently bananas are like, you can't even say banana in a type 2 diabetes community, or else you will get slaughtered on the internet, because that's what happened. They were like, you should not be instructing people to eat bananas. I was like, it's a banana. Like,
yeah, like it has
apparently
vitamins and minerals.
apparently they're killing everybody left and right. And I was just completely unaware and like so irresponsible. Like, Julianne, is this like the idea that in this particular group, and this, I feel like half of this stuff is conspiracy theories, but it was like, if you eat bananas, then the fructose makes your liver a fatty liver. And like, that was the statement about why bananas are off limits. Like, as the resident dietitian on this particular campfire, can you confirm or deny that a banana is going to murder my body? Because I feel like it shouldn't.
Bananas, out of most fruits, bananas have the highest carbs, like compared to other fruits. They're higher in carbs, but they're not gonna destroy your liver or give you a fatty liver. I've actually had to remove myself. I like joined a bunch of Facebook groups for like client research to like figure out what questions people were asking, and I just had to take myself out because the amount of really aggressive uneducated nutrition knowledge that's given on the internet is astounding.
Uneducated and aggressive is like so true. I mean, it's wild. It's a battlefield out there. Like, it's bananas. So it's bananas. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Hey, so Mila, something that I'm really interested in chatting with you about is, so you were originally diagnosed as type 2. What was your journey like during the time that you were managing for type 2? And then like, how did that shift once you were like correctly diagnosed?
Yeah, it was difficult for me. I think that's probably like the one word I would use to sum it up, like just difficult. It was like a labor to think about taking care of myself every day, because I felt like all of the, like I said before, like all of the information geared toward like what I can't do. And so I was always feeling like, am I like teetering the line, or am I doing this wrong? Or like, how do I know if I'm doing this right? And my brain just like doesn't operate from the standpoint of deficit. Like, I always try and think of the positives or the things that work. And so it was really difficult for me to just make it through a day, because I was like, okay, I'm calculating on my hands, like, okay, these are the 20 things I can't do. And these are the only options in front of me. Like, how am I supposed to adapt to this? And I think that it was really hard for a while, until honestly, just like talking to other people with diabetes, because before I started to like get comfortable with the fact that I had autonomy, or that I could like do things differently than what like the textbook way to do it was, I didn't really know anybody with diabetes except for my mom, who never wanted to talk about it. And she was like, I don't care if I know you or not, and you're my daughter or not, I'm not going to tell you anything about my experience with diabetes, because I don't want to. I don't have positive feelings around it, so I don't want to talk about it. And so I kind of felt like I was on my own. Like, I was like, I don't really know anybody. And when I started like making friends in the online community, like finding people through Twitter, I don't think I've ever met anyone through a Facebook group that has been a friend, but I think Twitter has worked out really well. And my blog too, like as I have been writing stuff, and then people find my email and they're like, hey, I wanted to like reach out to you and tell you that I tried this or did this. I think comparing notes with other people was what helped me realize, like, you're one, not on your own doing it, and two, like you're kind of the boss more than you think you are, and it's okay to try different things and to like figure out what's going to work for you and what doesn't. And I think that the only shift or like change between the two diagnoses for me was just the way that healthcare providers treated me, and how much more information I feel like I got when I had type 1.5 on my chart versus type 2. And so like walking into an appointment with a dietitian with type 2, like it was that list of deficits, all these things that you can't do, but here are some of the things that you can do, and try to adapt these for yourself and your culture and your husband and your way of life. And like, try that and go forth, and like, we'll come back and talk about it. And then now having the conversations it feels a lot different. It's a lot more understanding. So if I talk about how I had some fruit and it spiked my blood sugar, or I ate a piece of candy and it made me go from like 120 to 300, Like, why is there such that big disparity? Like, I had one bite, like what happened? I have more, like, there's more grace given, I feel like, instead of like a you shouldn't eat candy. It's like, well, maybe you needed to take more insulin for that, or time your insulin differently, or here's like 5 other suggestions about what you could look for next time whenever you feel like you're experiencing a high because of something that you ate. So I feel like there's a lot more like education, and just a little bit more understanding, like those things are going to happen and here's how you work with them, instead of having kind of like the mindset or the attitude like these should never happen. You should never spike your blood sugar, or you should never be in a place where you've like eaten a piece of chocolate that someone offered you and now your numbers are out of range. So things like that I think are a little bit different, but in terms of managing, like I just feel more confident about managing now, and not so much like I'm walking on eggshells anymore. Like I feel like if I did something or something isn't going my way, I kind of know why, and then I know what to do to fix it. And I feel like everybody, like regardless of type, should have that ability and that feeling, because it's so freeing when you're able to say like, I know exactly why I had the outcome I did, instead of seeing a number that maybe makes you feel bad or maybe makes you feel like you did something wrong. And it gives you, I think, a lot more power to be able to say like, okay, here's what I can do to make it better in the future. And that's just so beneficial for your mindset, because I think a lot of us, like when we're diagnosed with type 2, we're down on ourselves. Like we're told that like you did this, it's your fault. You didn't like eat right, you didn't take care of yourself, and so that's why you're in this position now. And that can kind of like consume your thoughts when you're first diagnosed and you're just trying to like figure out how to make things better. And I definitely think like negative self-talk is like a huge barrier in the beginning, because like that's all you know how to do. Like you're not getting the encouragement that you need unless you have like a really, really good care team that is like there with you and supporting you and like lifting you up. But most people don't get that in the onset of their diagnosis.
Yeah, and I think that that is a huge reason why I was as successful as I was when I was first diagnosed, was like, and this is something that I talk about to the point of like taking up way more pages than I anticipated the epilogue of my book would take up. But like, diabetes is one of the most political diseases out there, I think, because yes, it's true that like I decide what I put in my mouth, I decide how I move my body, I decide when I take my medicine, I decide how I manage my stress, but like all of those things are choices. And I think it's interesting to hear and affirming of my understanding of what I thought your answer would be between the type 2 and type 1.5 is like, when there is that, oh, well, now it's more on the autoimmune side, like that's kind of out of your control. And there's more of a pass in the form of support versus shaming and stigma and everything else. Because while it's true that I'm the one that chooses the food and I'm the one that moves my body, my success was largely rooted in my privilege, because like I'm a white woman with at the time I had a 6-figure salary, corporate healthcare benefits, like an awesome boss who would let me go take the afternoon off to go paddleboard so I could like get my body moving. Like he didn't care, as long as my work was getting done, it wasn't a problem. And that's definitely not the case for everybody. Like not everybody lives in a place where you can even access fresh, whole, healthy food. Like if you live in a food desert, you're probably having Pop-Tarts for breakfast versus a banana. God forbid you have a banana. But like you don't have the same foundation to from which to make choices as like whatever the standard person with diabetes should have, because I think that that's one of the things that's really doing a disservice to folks that are newly diagnosed, just like in the medical establishment as it were, is like it isn't one size fits all. Like it's not as simple as giving somebody a meal plan and calling it good. Like I know, Julianne, some of your work just outside of folks with diabetes, like in intuitive eating in general, is largely rooted in like allowing people to reestablish themselves as the authority. I'd love, like, what advice would you give somebody like, for example, Sydney, 3 years ago, I would have walked in and been like, Julianne, I just got diagnosed with diabetes. Here's a list of all the food I can't eat. Like, what is the first thing you say to somebody that's like ready to just start restricting for the sake of health? Like, how do we not encourage people to do that?
it's really hard, especially if someone already has it in their mind that they have to do it. Oftentimes you're not ready for intuitive eating until you're ready for intuitive eating. Like some people are just not at the point to accept it. Usually they have to fail at their last diet, whatever it may be. They have to have one last push. So I worked clinical for a while, and I had clients come in and they'd be like, like this other dietitian put me on this like 100-calorie meal plan, and they told me I couldn't eat carbs ever. And they had like crazy restriction. And after that failed for them, and they were at the point that like, this isn't going to work. Then they were ready to kind of accept it. So oftentimes people have to get there on their own, which is super frustrating. But often I like to say, can you imagine not ever eating that? Like, is this something that's sustainable? Like, can you go the rest of your life and never eat a piece of toast again? Like, I certainly can. I have a piece of toast every day, but going through and saying like, can you see yourself never consuming these foods? And oftentimes people are like, no, I don't. Like, I would never want to not eat a cookie again. That sounds terrible. And just getting to them to the point that like, hey, we have research that shows that this intuitive eating actually helps manage blood sugar. It helps manage type 2 diabetes. There's research behind it. You can read it. You can do that all on your own. But would you rather have something that lets you eat these foods in a way that's still going to help you manage your disease, make your body feel good, make your mind feel good? Or would you like to try to never eat them again and then most likely have a binge or overconsume them and feel pretty terrible? It's kind of choosing between that positive and negative light, like you want the sun or like a storm cloud. But yeah, unfortunately, people normally have to get there on their own.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to unlearn, right? Like we are just force fed diet culture from the second we can choose to put any kind of food in our mouth. Like, and even like we had a call last night, and Kenya was saying there was some kind of conversation where she was like, you're a grown up and you can go do that now. Like you can go have whatever you want. If you want to go have the ice cream, you can go have the ice cream. If you want to go have the cake, you can have the cake. And there was a very distinct moment for me where that clicked, and it was last year. So last year I had a hypoglycemic episode at a concert, and that was where I realized that like I had reversed or now was controlling my type 2 diabetes strictly via the nutrition plan and how I move my body. I wasn't on medication. I wasn't doing insulin or anything else. And I had been eating, like I was still managing for high blood sugar, even though my labs, like the last labs that I had done, they're like, your A1C looks great. You're looking awesome. Like, way to go. We didn't talk about reintroducing some of these foods back into a nutrition plan because I had just been like avoiding sugar and avoiding all the things that I thought would make my blood sugar go through the roof. And so when we didn't talk about reintroduction and I was still managing for high blood sugar, like I was at that point, I had an eating disorder. Like I was orthorexic for the sake of talking. Like it wasn't a conscious choice because I thought I was still managing for high blood sugar, but like that was definitely what was going on. Like I was restricting to the point of now I'm sick, to the point where I am like falling to the ground, low blood sugar low. So I think something that's really interesting about the whole conversation of like coming back to being an authority, and the moment that I remember so clearly was after that happened, I was like, doctor, like, what's up? Like, do I still have diabetes? Like, is that a thing? And they're like, if looking at your labs, if you had told me that you had diabetes and I didn't know that you did, I wouldn't think that you do. So like, good on you. And now whatever you had not been eating, you need to eat more, and you need to eat like all the things, like full permission to reintroduce stuff back into your diet. And I was like, I'm going to need you to repeat that. Did you just say I can have whatever I want and I should eat more of it? Because that was so like, it just blew my mind. Like I couldn't figure it out. And so I feel like when I went after they told me that, I was like, okay, well, I asked Barry, I was like, can we go to McDonald's? I want to get a McFlurry. Like I hadn't had one in forever. And it was one of those things where I was like, this is the first thing I want in this new reckless life where I get to eat whatever I want. And Barry was like, you can always have a McFlurry. Like you are a grown up and you can drive your butt to McDonald's and get a McFlurry if you want one. And I was like, oh, because like I'd still had been like watching what I eat, because that's what my mom said I should do when I was little, because if I didn't, I'd end up fat like her, because apparently being fat is the worst thing you can be in America as a woman. So I was like, all of these layers just started coming off at once. I was like, okay, so I have been eating intuitively to the point where like I found the foods that make me feel good and also help benefit, and regulate my blood sugar. And then I was like eating not very intuitively, because I wanted to make sure that I was like the good diabetes patient. And then when I was like free and clear and off medication, I was like, oh, so now I can have whatever I want. Like, this cycle is wild, and there's so many conflicting messages. Like, how how do you, Julianne, encourage somebody like so now I'm a new patient. I'm like, I'm ready to try intuitive eating. Like, what are the first steps that you offer people to start reestablishing yourself as that expert of what your body needs and what your body wants? Because we are fed so much competing information all the time. Like, what you see on TV versus what you hear from your doctor versus what you see in the media versus what you read in these groups versus what you hear on this podcast, even like what are the literal first steps people can take to start to reestablish themselves as that authority?
So this sounds completely unrelated, but with every single person I work with, the first thing we handle is self-talk. So that is the number one thing that gets in our way. I call it the inner critic, so the voice in your head, because that takes all of those messages that we've been fed our whole entire lives, even the way that we were talked to as small children, and the way that we saw our parents and our peers get talked to, and all of those messages go straight up to your noggin and we just feed those back to ourselves. And we have this negative self-talk. We're constantly criticizing every single bite we put in our bodies and how we move and what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. And it creates this layer of doubt. If you think of it as a fire, like your intuitive self, you just smother it straight out with all of these different negative ideas from all of these different people. So working on removing that inner critic, which is there to protect us, is evolutionary. There's a bunch of research, like it's there for good purposes, but we don't live in caves anymore, and we don't need that little voice in our shoulder to tell us that we're going to kill ourselves, like falling off a cliff. So getting rid of that voice and learning to quiet it, tone it down, so that we can actually think for ourselves, and that we have room to non-judgmentally evaluate the choices that we're making in our lives without all of the shame and the guilt and all of these different ideas, because that's really what's happening. Like, diet culture puts all of this morality on all of our choices, that we're a good person if we do the dishes and we eat the kale salad, but we're terrible if we haven't cleaned the bathroom in 2 weeks and you have a cookie at like 8 a.m. So removing that guilt and shame so that we can actually just evaluate our choices non-judgmentally, just out of pure curiosity, and we can actually start listening to our body without putting all of these layers on it and smothering our fire. Did that make any sense?
100%. Yeah, because, and Mila had mentioned this earlier, is like that, especially around the type 2 situation, it's like there's so much stigma and so much shame, which compounds all the negative self-talk we already do. It's like you get this diagnosis and it's like confirmation that you suck at feeding yourself and that you suck at moving your body and like all these things, because you go in there and you're like, I don't feel good. I'm here to like feel better. Then you get a diagnosis like type 2 diabetes, which if you're coming at it, like if you already have a disordered relationship with food, if you already have a disordered relationship with your body or body dysmorphia, the way you see yourself, like it just like, I feel like that diagnosis, and this is another interesting area that I'd like to go, like how can, like, I saw this as an opportunity when I got diagnosed with diabetes, because I was like, I could look at this like a death sentence and just be like down and out about it, but kind of like Mila, I'm a perpetual optimist. Like, I want to find the silver lining wherever I can. And I saw this as an opportunity to actually take care of myself, like for the first time, because it was serious enough, like a chronic illness. That's a serious enough diagnosis to like make me get it together, but not serious enough to completely derail my life and like make me think about like arranging for, my funeral and stuff, like a terminal cancer diagnosis or something. Like what other than like the inner critic stuff, what's the most important part of learning how to navigate any kind of new condition, but in particular, let's talk about diabetes, in a way that doesn't compound the things that we already know? Like, we've got to get on top of the inner critic and like develop a relationship with that inner voice that talks mad trash to ourselves. We start looking at how foods make us feel. We start trying activities to see if like that makes us feel good in our bodies. Like what is if there was like, if we could like wave our magic wand and like start over with how people are diagnosed and the steps that we give them, or the steps that we share with them for diabetes management protocols, like, Julianne, in your dream world, like, what would the doctors say when people get diagnosed? And then Mila, I'll ask you a similar question too.
Yeah. And I have very big beef with the medical society in general, which is why I don't work clinical. But our healthcare system is very, very strongly rooted in fat phobia, as well as a lot of other prejudices, but there is a ton of fat phobia, and type 2 diabetes has been associated with that. So there's all this, like we've been talking about, this shame and stigma around it. And I like Mila said about the difference between her care teams, that's very real. I've seen a lot of doctors and a lot of dietitians judge people straight out. And when you're sitting there and you're judging people, you're not helping them. You're not there to actually support them and provide them and ask them what they need from you. You're there to sit there and judge their choices. Whereas majority of chronic diseases can be accounted for by genetics. Like, our genetics play like 75% role in our ability to develop these diseases. Like, a lot of times it's not really in our control whether they happen. Like, yes, we make choices and things happen, but we're predisposed to them. And removing that shame that you did this to yourself. No one's out there, trying to get a chronic illness. No one's out there trying to get diabetes. Our bodies do things. Biology works in different ways, and these things happen. So first off, yeah, I would love if doctors would stop blaming people's bodies and people's weights on things. And health is different for all people. People get diagnosed with a lot of different things every single day, and it's not their fault. So removing that shame so that people can actually ask questions, because I'd say that's the number one issue I had while working as a dietitian in clinical settings. People thought that I was the food police and that I would tell them that they could never eat cake again and that their life was over. But approaching it with kindness and teaching people that they can live gently, and that, mistakes will happen. Your blood sugar is going to spike, your blood sugar is going to drop, and you're going to learn about yourself along the way. Sorry, little bubble in my throat. You're going to learn about yourself and learn how to handle it in a way that works for your body. But I would love if doctors would stop telling people that they can never eat carbs again. And that's my number one beef right there. And that they would stop shaming people for developing these diseases, because then people don't feel as open to actually ask the questions that they need to ask. And then they end up feeling lost and confused. And then usually their health suffers because they just assume that, they're not there to help me, and that we can't, help alleviate their symptoms.
Thank you for that. And Mila, to you as well. I know you had mentioned just the difference that you felt between type 2 and type 1.5. Is there, and we know that this current medical world is largely rooted in fat phobia and a lot of other phobias and isms. Has your race played any part of that with how you feel the doctors treat you as a Black woman who's coming in to advocate for herself? Has that been a challenging part of your journey as well, between the different diagnoses and the way that you were treated as such?
I actually think that my misdiagnosis was heavily rooted in stigma, and I would say I don't want to say like racism outright, but I think that race did come into play. And I think this for a couple reasons, because somebody else asked me this question a couple weeks ago, because my re-diagnosis is kind of new to me. And so it's been this process of like accepting it and understanding it and figuring out what went wrong so that I can tell other people like, this is the path that I took. And like, here are the questions that I faced and that I've asked myself about it. And one of the things that I think really played into that was the fact that I went to the doctor at like 25 years old, like telling him I can't sleep throughout the whole night. I have to get up and pee every 30 minutes and I am endlessly thirsty and I'm drinking like 2 gallons of water a day. I lost 30 pounds in 8 weeks. And he was like, oh, well, that's great. That's a great improvement if you're losing weight. And I was like, no. But like 30 pounds in 8 weeks is not good weight loss. Like that's scary weight loss. Like I think something is wrong. And instead of paying attention to those things, like paying attention to my age and my symptoms and like the things that I was saying were making me really afraid of whatever was on the other side of whatever tests I was going to get, I told them I have a family history of diabetes. My mother and grandmother both had gestational diabetes, which turned into type 2 for both. And that was what he latched on to, not the symptoms that I kept talking about exhibiting, but he was like, oh, well, you have a family history of type 2, so you must have type 2 diabetes. And I took that as, well, he knows what he's talking about. He's the doctor. Like I took that at face value. And it wasn't until getting re-diagnosed that I was like, he definitely latched on to the wrong things, because the 2 doctors that I saw who basically said like something is really wrong here, like you're doing all of the things that you're supposed to be doing, you're eating right, we're looking at what you're logging, it looks good, your exercise patterns are great, something else is up. And the 2 doctors who really like brought up those red flags, because I saw them, but I was like, well, like this other doctor told me I have type 2, so I have type 2, like it's fine, like I check all the boxes, you know, like I am worried about my other symptoms, but he's not. So if he's not, I guess they're not a big deal. And it wasn't until like this part of my new care team was like, no, that's wrong. Like something is not okay. And especially if you're in your mid 20s and you're looking at a diabetes diagnosis, he should have checked you. He should have confirmed your diagnosis before just saying it's type 2, regardless of your family history, regardless of if you're overweight or not. Like he should have done the due diligence and checked. And then 4 years later, I get like a completely different diagnosis because somebody did check and somebody said something was wrong. And instead of looking at like the things that check the box, the things that say, the things that are obvious, that are like, okay, well, if this, and this are true, this must mean that this other thing is true. And instead of like looking a little bit deeper and listening to what I was saying, instead of looking at me and saying like, well, this is her chart and she checks these boxes, and so this is what we're going to go with. I think a lot of that has to do with race, because I think and a lot of my other friends with type 1 diabetes have said this too. They were like, I was tested immediately and there was no doubt. Like I was in my 20s and I was tested for type 1 and they didn't ask me or like ask me about my family history or go back and forth with me about my symptoms. They just said, you're here, you're in the hospital, we're going to test you, just confirming your diagnosis. Like if you're one or the other, it doesn't matter. We just know how to treat you. And it's interesting because they're like, I don't think that if I was a person of color, it would have necessarily happened that way. And then people of color that I've talked to have said the same thing as me. Like, yeah, I was living with diabetes for 5 years. They said it was type 2. I had DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis, and had to go to the hospital. They argued with me in the hospital over whether or not I'm ketone prone type 2 or type 1 and whether or not they wanted to test me for it. But I was sitting there like, I'm dying, can you do something? And it took like, I had to go to the ends of the earth to find out like what kind of diabetes I had. So I think it's definitely like, it's definitely something that happens. Like, I don't think that people of color are often listened to as much as, we would like to be in those situations. And like, I feel like I'm kind of a product of that. Like, I lived with type 2 for 4 years. And then it took two things. It took one doctor who had the humility to say, I don't feel like I can help you anymore. We have tried everything. I don't want to put you on more medication and make you miserable. Like, let's send you to a specialist. And then it took the specialist sitting there and saying, tell me about your history. Tell me about what your blood sugars have been like, what you have been through, when were you diagnosed, and asked like all of these great questions. And then said, I am like 98% sure that I know what's going on with you, but let me test you to be sure. And I want to tell you what I think you're facing, and then explaining it to me. Whereas like my very first doctor was like, oh, family history, you have type 2. Leave my office, like go take some medicine.
Right.
Here's a referral to a dietitian and I'll see you in 3 months. So I think those, you know, as sad as it is, like those things definitely come into play. And what's most sad, because like I feel like I'm on the good end of it now, like I have the right diagnosis and it doesn't matter to me what type, like it just matters to me that I'm managing in the right way. But I think so many people don't get the right diagnosis, and then that's so harmful because it's like you're living this life that you're not really supposed to be living, and you're spending money and resources and taking medications that your body doesn't need because somebody made an assumption and didn't double check it. And so I think that's like the hard part. And so for me, like what I wish doctors would do is just that confirmation. Like not everybody needs an antibody test, but I think like if a patient has a strong enough case and is telling you like, these are the things that are going on with me, look beyond the surface to really find those things out and confirm them so that your patient has the right quality of life and is able to like live in a way that's most beneficial to them, instead of just like getting them out of your office in the 20 minutes that you have, because doctors don't have a lot of time either. So it's like, I got to do what I got to do in 20 minutes that I can see you, and then come back next time or call or whatever, and we'll discuss. But I really wish that that was like a part of the process, especially for people with diabetes, because I don't know that there are many other chronic illnesses where there's not like a confirmation, you know, where it's just assumed and it's like,
right,
what test? And then that's going to tell you everything. It's like with type 2 diabetes, especially, like it's typically just based on your A1C, your 3-month average. And so having negative antibodies is also a way to confirm that you have type 2 or that you have type 1, and you have to be treated a little bit differently. So I think that's kind of like what I think about now, being in the shoes that I'm in, is kind of like, those are the things that I wish were a little bit different.
yeah, and there's obviously like we can't solve the whole like medical establishment in one virtual campfire, but I think just if we could all just slow down, like to your point, you're like the doctor's got to do what they got to do. They got 20 minutes and that's it. And it sounds like the specialist that you saw that sat down and was like, so tell me about your symptoms. Tell me about your diagnosis. Tell me about life with diabetes since this has happened. Probably had more than 20 minutes to like go through your case and get stuff done.
Surprisingly, he just
so then it can be handled.
Yeah, it can be. And that's what made me see it. I was like, I had the same amount of time with him that I've had with any other doctor, but he really just, instead of taking the time to say like, here's what I think is happening, I already read your chart, you know, like, here's what you need to do and like get out of here. He was like, I read your chart, but I want to hear from you. Like, I want to understand in your words what you think you're dealing with, and then we'll talk about how we move forward. And I think that that was such a great way to approach the conversation, because instead of saying like, you know, what do you want, or what do you need, or what's your problem today? It was more like, tell me about you. I want to get to know you as a patient. I want to get to know why you're here today, why you're taking this 20 minutes out of your day to sit with me. And I don't think it was hard for him to ask that question, but I think it was just like a part of his nature also as a person. So I think I got lucky there too, that I got someone who was like, hey, I want to get to know what's happening with you so that we can get this solved. And, you know, I want to understand why you're referred. But it was like, wow, no other doctor has really ever asked me that or asked me to tell them anything about my health. It's always like, okay, well, saw your chart. You're taking these 4 medications, so I'll refill them for you. And then I'll see you in 3 months. Have you had your labs yet? Like, go to the lab. And you know, it's like that, like, just like, here are the 5 things I need to do to get you out the door. And it was so different to have somebody actually
Right.
like sit and ask the questions.
Yeah, and man, and I think like to the fat phobia, transphobia, all the phobias, all the isms point, Julianne, something that you talk about a lot is health at every size. And I'd love to just kind of get an idea for folks that are listening that aren't familiar with that concept. What does that mean? And because I think like if there's a broader understanding of health at every size, then I think that patient outcomes are going to be a lot more um compassionate. Yeah. Okay, cool. Sweet. So hit it.
Yeah.
Let us know what you got.
I love this book. And actually, it is written by a trans man, Lindo Bacon, I think is how you say his name. But I love health at every size, but it is a weight neutral approach to health. So it really works on kind of dismantling this system. And it's based on research, which a lot of the times is what people like the myth about health at every size. They're like, oh, you're promoting obesity or you're promoting diabetes. And I'm like, well, the fitness and diet industry is worth like $7 billion. I don't think there's anyone out there like actively selling diabetes to people. But yeah, health in every size. Their tagline, specifically proven to boost health and self-esteem. It's evaluated in government-funded academic studies, data published in well-respected scientific journals, but it really works on leaving weight out of the question because oftentimes weight gets put onto blame. And we put everyone into these categories based on BMI, which was not developed for health. It was developed by a mathematician, I believe, a European mathematician off of 20-year-old white European males, which obviously the BMI scale then cannot apply to anyone in a different body. So anyone that's in a female body or a body of any other race besides like Finland, I believe it's from, BMI doesn't apply. So then we're shaming people and putting people on diets and restricting people's lives basically because they might fall into an overweight and are obese, whereas that might just be their natural body. Like we all come in different shapes and sizes. I like to say, like, if you're shoe size 9, you're not going to try to fit in a 6. Like you can't help it. That's just the size of your foot. And our bodies are biologically different. Some people are biologically hardwired to be a size 0. Some people are biologically hardwired to be healthy at a size 20. There's just a range based on DNA. So health at every size really works on taking the fat phobia out of healthcare. So oftentimes, like Mila said, people come into the doctors and they have this whole list of symptoms, and instead of actually being listened to and heard, they're like, oh, well, you're overweight or you're obese. That's it. Lose weight. You'll be fine. And they have all of these health issues, whereas their weight might have either been a symptom of that, like maybe they're above their natural biological set point, and that's a symptom of what's going on, of whatever illness they're having, or maybe that's just their body and they're struggling with all of these other issues and they're just getting passed over because all doctors can focus on is the weight. When I worked in the ICU, I had patients come in and doctors would refuse to feed them for a week or 2 at a time because they're like, oh, they'll just lose weight. Like they're in a medically induced coma. Like they're fine. And they've just had major surgery or cardiovascular disease and they need nutrition to heal. Yeah, your mouth is open, like rightfully so. I got in a lot of fights as a dietetic intern in the ICU. But they're like, oh, like they're not awake, they won't notice. And people wake up and they've lost 80 pounds in a week because they haven't eaten in 7 days and their body just starts eating themselves. And yeah, the back of this says myth, fat kills. On reality, people that are overweight actually live longer than people that are average weight or normal weight. There's no studies that show that weight loss actually prolongs your life. It's not saving years off your life, losing 5 pounds. And not everyone can lose weight if they try. Like I tried in my eating disorder for years. I was like, just the last 10 pounds, please, I'll do anything to lose the last 10 pounds. And my body is not hardwired to do that. It was like, no, we're not going any lower. That's unhealthy. You'll die if you lose any more weight. Biology is always going to win. So instead, we focus on science. We actually focus on science and health promoting behaviors. So I don't care about anyone's weight. I don't care about how many grams of macros they're eating. If they've had, like their B12 vitamin today. I care about health promoting behavior. So are they eating a balanced diet? Are they moving their body? Are they sleeping? Are they having active coping mechanisms? Do they take care of themselves? Are they showering? Are they having meaningful relationships? All of these different things are the full picture of health. And those count for so much more than what the number on the scale is. That was like a little rant there, but I love health at every size.
I dig it. No, but I think it's an important part to talk about too, because like for my entire life, like I thought if my body didn't look like a Victoria's Secret model that I had failed in some way. And like I'm just not built to look like that. Like when I was in the middle of managing my diabetes, like I lost, like I am in the best physical shape that I've been in since like ever. And for me, that's not even about the number on the scale. Like I've seen smaller numbers on the scale, but like this body can go up mountains. This body can do that for days on end. This body is eating the food that it wants and it's feeling great while it's doing it. And I think when we start to remove the different layers that we've been taught are indicators of health, then we can stop judging ourselves so harshly, which then in turn makes it really hard to judge others. And that was kind of my journey with coming to love my body. Was like on my first backpacking trip in 2016, I was like, I didn't recognize the body I was in. And I was like, this is interesting. Like after a lifetime of being an athlete and never claiming that title because I wasn't an Olympian, I didn't think I was an athlete, which is also BS. I was just like, oh, well, what I do know about this body on this backpacking trip is that even though I don't recognize it, it just walked almost all the way across an island. I'd like for my body to be really happy doing that and to feel good while doing that. And I'd like to do that more easily. And like those became my metrics versus like the number on the scale. So I think it's all just very interesting how there's so much that we I just think it's interesting that we tell ourselves a lot of weird stories because there's like, I think the latest numbers that I read was that the diet industry is like $72 billion. What? Like, that's a lot of money. People make a lot of money making us hate ourselves.
Which is why, I mean, that's the whole structure of the system. That's why diet culture it was created. It's based out of racism and patriarchy, and it is created to keep our focus off of all of the terrible things going on in our world and to spend our money and our thoughts actually just destroying ourselves so that we can't overtake that system. But yeah, and back to what you were saying about not recognizing your body but still being able to hike across the island, I always like to say athletic is not a body type, because I grew up as an athlete too, and everyone was like, oh, you ran a marathon? Like, no, you don't get off the couch. I was like, just because I'm curvy, like that doesn't mean that I can't do anything. Yeah, athletic is not a body type. Fit is not a body type. You can have fitness, you can be an athlete, you can have even like measurements like VO2 max and things like that. You can have high measures of that in all bodies. They're not restricted to just size 0s and size 2s. You can be athletic and be, pregnant or be obese or be underweight or all of these different things. Like you can be athletic in any body. But yeah, society sure does like to tell us that we can't.
So Mila, before we jump into Q&A, is there anything like, I know you do some diabetes patient advocacy work, you live with diabetes, you write a blog, you share wonderful recipes, which we're going to be sharing over the course of this program with the folks in in this community. Is there anything else, like, soapbox is yours, hop up on it? Is there anything else like about diabetes or living with it, or advice you would give folks that are newly diagnosed or are working to avoid it if they can? Like, what does Mila have to say for anybody that's listening?
I think for me, it's really, if you're newly diagnosed or if you've been living with diabetes for a while, I think just remember to give yourself grace. Um, and don't feel like you have to aim for perfection all the time. Like, it's okay if things are a little off every once in a while, or if you're having an off day and you don't necessarily feel like eating every meal at home or preparing every single meal in your day or going out for that walk. I know earlier this week, and I'm sure like all of us, I was just a wreck and I was like, I just don't want to do anything. And I had posted an Instagram story of me looking very tired. And I was like, I don't want to do anything today. And one of my friends in the community just messaged me back and she goes, well, don't. Like, why do you feel like you have to get up and work today? Or why do you feel like you have to be productive when you aren't feeling well or you're tired or you're exhausted? And so I think from that perspective, like, listen to your body, and if you don't feel like doing something that day, you don't have to do it. Like, you're under no obligation to be perfect and to achieve perfection. If getting your feet out of bed and like letting your feet hit the floor is the only thing that you can do that day, like, that's the best thing that you can do that day, and you get a clap for that, and you do more the next time you feel like doing more.
Yeah, dig it. How about you, Julianne? Anything that you would say? Any other soapboxy, ranty, anything from this dietitian's perspective that you could just offer to anybody that's listening?
I think she just summed it up perfectly. That's always like the note that I leave all my clients on last session, is just telling them to remember to live gently with themselves. Like, we talk to ourselves more than we talk to anyone else in the world, and there's enough negativity and detrimental things going around. So just speak kindly, live kindly with yourself, because this is your body for life, and it's the only one you got, and you just got to love it and take care of it.
I like that. That's a nice one to end on. Okay, I dig it. So, if anybody on our Zoom audience has a question, go ahead and pop on your camera. And I'm really looking forward to what we got going on with I'm going to share some popcorn recipes this week from Mila, like how to jazz it up, make it not so boring, and like frankly, this is a week to eat popcorn. We got one. Um Yay. Okay, cool. So if there's no questions, then Stephanie, Lydia, Beth, let's pop on our cameras. Let's do this group gratitude circle, and we'll send it off. So for everybody that's listening, podcast wise, thank you for tuning in. This is where we'll say sayonara. And for everybody on YouTube, thanks for joining us as well. And where are you guys? Anybody want to do a group gratitude circle? All right, well, we'll do it with the host. Hey, all right, cool. So I'm Sydney, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to connect with Mila and Julianne today, and share a little bit of screen time and bust some myths and just like kind of jam on how it's all really going to be okay. Like, we tell ourselves a lot of crazy stories, and the world around us does a lot of that too. And so when we can kind of separate ourselves from that and just trust that everything's going to be awesome, I feel like it's a lot easier to get through this. So I'm thankful for you guys, and I'm thankful for the ability to do this work and live this life. So Mila, what are you thankful for?
I am thankful, I think, for you, first of all, for bringing us all together and allowing us to have this really great conversation. I'm thankful for now knowing Julianne and knowing that there are people like you out there who are cognizant that we're just human beings trying to be human beings. And, perfection isn't the goal. It's to be happy and healthy. And that's the bar. Like, that's it. I think I'm also just thankful for people who have been kind enough to like be really understanding toward me in a time where I am like learning to live with a whole new diagnosis that I already accepted. And now things are different and my brain is different and I'm trying to get used to that. So I'm really thankful for people who just listen and who understand that it's kind of crazy trying to just like live with a totally new diagnosis after you've already gotten one.
That's a big one. Man, and like having that crew of like support is like, oh, that's good. So necessary. Julianne, how about you? What are you thankful for?
I am also thankful for being here. I'm so happy that you invited me here, and we got to talk for the past hour, because that just like made my day. It's been a really rough couple of days. So super thankful for being here. I'm also very thankful that today we had amazing weather here in Idaho, and I got to wear short sleeves and go for a nice long hike with my puppy. Who just like made today infinitely better. Just getting like a dog kiss today was amazing.
Yay. Beth, how about you? What are you thankful for?
Well, I want to say that I really enjoyed, first of all, listening to your conversation. And I'm a pharmacist. And so, like, on behalf of healthcare professionals, I know it's not my responsibility to apologize, but like, heartfelt, I'm sorry. Like, I'm planning an early retirement from pharmacy for probably some of those same reasons and frustrations, because there's a lot of things that happen. I feel like I understand some of the other side. I'm not making excuses for how people are handled, but just the way how healthcare and the pressures that people feel, sometimes like we're just not even allowed a lot of time to spend with people, and that really bothers me. But I spend a lot of time too on the phone talking to patients and like correcting things that I feel like patients were misinformed, and that kind of bothers me. So I'd like to figure out a way to help people with all kinds of different things going on in their life, and not just limited to that, like pharmacy. I'm not bashing all of it, because there's some really good, healthcare providers out there, but it is amazing to me as a healthcare professional trying to navigate our current healthcare system. Like, I really don't know how people do it that don't have a background in healthcare, and like knowing how, like having inside information and knowing the right questions to ask, and just how to navigate things. It's just really crazy. So I'm really grateful that you shared your story, not just for me personally, but just for everyone, because I think, that's really challenging. And I appreciate learning more about how individuals, have experienced the system, so that I can be better in my current role as a pharmacist too. And it just really taught me a lot just about body positivity and, other considerations that I think we all deal with, whether we really have a diagnosis with diabetes or not. So I'm really grateful that all three of you really, like shared your personal journey tonight. It really means a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Thanks for being here. Stephanie, how about you? What are you thankful for?
Well, I guess first I'm thankful that everybody's moving tonight instead of having a totally frozen screen. So that helped the conversation a little bit for me. Other than that, I think I'm grateful for the conversation itself, especially some of the portions on intuitive eating and not being as stuck into this formula that both people talked about. Because right now I am at a place in my life where not only do I have diabetes, but I have autoimmune conditions. And so it's all about restricting what I can eat. That's all I hear from anybody, is not just because the diabetes. Well, you can't have the carbs because diabetes and because of autoimmune. You can't have milk because it's going to be inflammatory, and that's all I'm hearing. So it's nice to hear some other perspectives.
And did you have any questions for Julianne or Mila?
Nothing specific. I probably would be interested in learning more about the topics themselves, but not a specific question.
Cool. Perfect. Well, we've got contact information, so you can learn more specifically from these two wonderful gals, or the topics in general. So we'll make sure you get that. Thank you. Lydia, how about you? What are you thankful for?
Lydia's still muted.
There she goes.
Okay.
There she is.
There I'm here. I'm not used to all this, but I'm thankful that I'm here with you gals tonight. And I enjoyed listening to Mila and Julianne, and also Sydney, especially you. I'm also thankful to be able to, I just had a hip replacement done 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I'm up walking without the walker and the cane. So I'm thankful for that also. And wishing everyone well.
Nice. Thank you, Lydia. Lydia is my mother-in-law, so that's why I'm the favorite of the guests tonight. Sorry, you can't beat it. It's okay though.
Don't forget, Barry. He's my nurse, so he's
that's right. Yes, he is. Well, cool. That's all we got going on for tonight. So thank you everybody for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for tuning in. Next week we have a whole lot of awesome stuff going on as well. So we have on Monday we're talking with Marianetta Deffren. She's a organizer for Girl Trek, which is a organization that is on a mission to help Black women reclaim their health and their time. And so the Girl Trek mission is to get women out for just like a 30-minute walk every day. And Marianette is one of the organizers within that organization. So she hosts local hikes and local walks in her community. And then we also have the Virtual Campfire on Thursday, which we'll be chatting with the registered dietitian from Whole30 and the founder of Whole30, Melissa Urban. And so one of the reasons why we're kind of switching things up is I want to present a bunch of different options for ways that you can approach nutrition and get different perspectives from different people that are doing some other work in the area or in the field of nutrition and diabetes specifically. So Whole30 is more of a plan with some rules. So there are rules, which goes completely against everything that we talked about today. But the reason that I'm introducing Whole30 to this community is I see like it's a program that has some restrictions on what you can and can't eat, but what I don't see restriction, I see abundance. And what I see is a focus on whole, healthy ingredients that can really help you like get in tune with what eating intuitively means. So like if you're paying attention to how these different foods during this program make you feel, then you're getting closer to intuitive eating as a default setting by participating in something like that. So we've got Stephanie Grunke, who's their dietitian in-house, and then Melissa is the founder of Whole30. She wrote the books. She's like the CEO of the organization. And I came to find out about her last year when we were on tour, because one of the women in our community was like, oh, you know who else finds healing in nature is Melissa Urban. And I was like, who's Melissa Urban? And they're like, she's the CEO of Whole30. I was like, cool, what's that? And they're like, oh, this program where you can like eat this specific way and go through all these things. But she in particular, she lives in Utah. Nature is her church. So we're going to be talking about how she finds healing in nature and balance in the outdoors. And yeah, so that's what we got going on. If you're able to join us for the program, you can go to hikingmyfeelings.org/diabetes. We have videos, we got worksheets, we got recipes, we have more community calls, more virtual campfires, all kinds of cool stuff going on. So be sure to tune in and come check us out and say hi. And so for everybody on YouTube, we're going to wave bye to the people on YouTube. Bye, YouTube. We'll see you later. Audio.